everyone, and welcome to another Half Pint session. Cheers. So, in the past, I have been called Stoic. I've also been called Geeky, which is why I'm really excited that I'm talking today with Stephen Kent, who is the man behind the Geeky Stoics website and podcast. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Nice to be here, David. It's only 3 o'clock here in the DC area, so I had to settle for water. What a disappointment, but wonderful to be on Pints with Jack.
Well, just before I jumped on, I had deployed the code to our server for the day, so I'm pretty much done. So I have the good stuff. I also have a brand to keep up, you know?
Yeah, keep me in your prayers.
Well, would you mind introducing yourself to our viewers and really just tell us a little bit of your backstory and how you came to be involved with geeky things, stoic things, and how that ultimately ended up with a website?
Sure. Well, I am a lifelong nerd and geek commentator and content creator. So, my primary love growing up was Star Wars. Star Wars is my steady. We've been going steady the longest, and I've been in the Star Wars podcasting world doing YouTube stuff. I had a show for a long time that was all about the politics of Star Wars called Beltway Banthas. And that turned into a media career for me. It actually helped me springboard from doing podcasts to doing television in the United States and in Britain. And it got me my first book deal. A couple of years ago, I authored How the Force Can Fix the World, Lessons on Life, Liberty, and Happiness from a Galaxy Far, Far Away. And that journey with Star Wars, I feel like it ran its course. I plumbed the depths of that fandom as an adult. And it was just a couple of Christmases ago when my sister, a minister out in Tennessee, she gifted me Mere Christianity, which I had read when I was a teenager. I think it was part of my youth group program for going through confirmation when I was like 15 years old. Mm-hmm. And I remember liking it, not loving it. But I also was a huge Narnia fan. I had Peter's sword replica on my wall when I was a teenager. I frequently was doodling about the beavers, and I identified very much with Edmund when I was a kid, not because I was the youngest brother. I happened to be the oldest. But because I just always felt like everyone was out to get me. And Edmund just spoke to my sour personality when I was a teenager. So Narnia and Lewis were early loves of mine, but boy, has it really flourished in adulthood for me. When I started Geeky Stoics, a YouTube channel, just a couple of years ago now, it was all about Stoicism and how you can find it in popular culture. Of course, I started with a heavy emphasis on Star Wars, but as soon as Mere Christianity came, busting back into my life a couple of Christmases ago, so came everything else with Lewis. It's just been like reopening a really great old box of candy, which, we'll just pretend candy has good shelf life, but maybe wine.
You identify as Edmund. You like candy. I'm a little worried about your siblings, but carry on.
Might be that Turkish delight. But no, I've always just been interested in the underlying philosophy of great stories. And so Geeky Stoics is our YouTube channel that is fully dedicated to that. And again, it was just about Stoicism in the beginning. But, the more I started revisiting and retouching my love of C.S. Lewis, it's also kind of served to take over the channel. It's kind of become an Inklings Stoicism and popular culture channel. And there's a lot of fun to be had at that intersection because, C.S. Lewis, for all of his quirkiness and capacity for wonder, he was also a remarkably kind of stoic guy. And it shows through in his writings, namely the Screw Tape Letters. And there's a lot to be said about that. So I look forward to uncovering a bit of that with you today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was trying to remember when I first came across Geeky Stoics. I'm not entirely sure, but I definitely remember the first time that I definitely went to all of my devices and accounts and made sure that everything was subscribed. And that was back at the beginning of 2005 when you did a video about C.S. Lewis and Rainn Wilson. And I absolutely loved it. And that was all right, this is definitely a channel that I need to make sure comes regularly into my inbox. And then over the course of the year of watching and listening, I kept thinking, he's bringing up C.S. Lewis and the Inklings an awful lot. So that was why I knew I had to bring you on for a half pint just to talk about it, make sure that people know about your content. But let's talk about some of the things that you've focused on with regards to Tolkien and Lewis. I mean, I was originally going to bring up a list, but there's so many things that you've where you end up pulling them in, whether it's talking about escapism or strongly held opinions or friendship. Where would you like to start? What is it that stands out for you?
Well, I think per the brand of Geeky Stoics, I think the best place to start would be the question of Stoicism and where you can sort of find it in a lot of these great stories and thinkers like Lewis. For me, this is all just an intellectual journey, and I love connecting the dots between different places. The Screw Tape Letters is one of the pieces that jumps out at me the most as, Stoicism, it is a relic of Greek and Roman philosophy and largely, pagan secular. We're talking about Epictetus and Cleanthes and Marcus Aurelius and all this sort of empty, vague talk about the logos, just sort of a divine being or logic in the universe. But we sort of see that those ethics, the Stoic principles of a divine order to the universe, are very much present in the work of Lewis. It's something that he appreciates, that there is a logic to everything that happens in the world. It's part of what brought him to Christianity in the first place, that all the puzzle pieces just connect if you're willing to see the truth of the Christian story. I think the abolition of man is something that touches on that very much, in all of his appreciation for the Tao, that there's just sort of an underlying reason to the world. Mere Christianity, chapter 1, understanding the natural law. These are all sort of things that are embedded in Stoic logic, that the world is not so much a mystery, that it's actually quite logical, and you can just sort of see how it all makes sense. The Screw Tape Letters, for example, I think letter number 6 is one that I always try to keep open and nearby. Letter number 6 from or to Wormwood. It begins with the question of fearing the future. We want him to be in maximum uncertainty so that his mind will be filled with contradictory pictures of the future. Boom, right there. You are dealing with Stoicism in the realm of control. Focusing on your fears about tomorrow and what the Stoics and particularly Aurelius would refer to as your impressions. You close your eyes and you have an impression of what you think might be coming, or the bad things that you are most worried about, leaving you with a question of what are you going to do with your power? What kind of autonomy do you have to actually shape the future based on your actions? And Screwtape and the demons of Satan, they want you to feel powerless so that you will give power in their direction. This chapter is just sort of a constant flow of different Stoic principles. There is nothing like suspense and anxiety to barricade a human's mind against the enemy. I love that because what Stoicism did for me as a young man, particularly entering my life and becoming more clear to me during COVID and the COVID-19 pandemic, was that when I was less focused on my fear, less focused on my anxieties, and more focused on how I comport myself, how I handle myself, the order that brought to my life allowed more light to come in. I think I grew in my faith the most over the past 5 years, not because of any particular revelation, but because my mind has gotten more quiet. And so if you've ever wondered, how can Stoicism serve Christianity when it comes from sort of a pagan tradition of Greeks and Romans who, in some cases, executed Christians after the time of Christ? It's because it's a philosophy that says you need to get your mind right, that you need to focus on what's in front of you. And boy, when you do that, you can really see some light coming through the curtains that points you back towards God.
Mm. My introduction to the Stoics actually was early Christianity. It was when I was reading about the church fathers and how they were despoiling the Egyptians, basically trying to work within the Greek philosophical frameworks they encountered to draw out the truth of it and retain that, and then chuck everything that they didn't like.
Mhm.
You said you encountered them quite early on. How did that happen? Because not everyone gets the Stoics in high school.
Yeah, I think for me it would probably just be college and comparative philosophy. I didn't take much of an interest in philosophy when I was in school. It was definitely sort of a second fiddle to my interest in politics, which was the focus of most of my energies. But it was always in the background, and it's something that I've only grown with at time. Now, I mean, one of the great examples of areas where there's, I don't know, I guess like a clash in different philosophical schools of appreciation for the Stoics. Who does C.S. Lewis probably admire as a writer and thinker more than anybody? It would probably be G.K. Chesterton. And,
He
the
stole enough of his stuff.
he stole enough of his stuff. And I will tell you, David, because I've been on such a deep dive for the past 5 years with Lewis, I have now started to make room to study Chesterton. And I finished Orthodoxy recently. And not only can I confirm Lewis did rip off a lot of not only Chesterton's mannerisms and ways of speaking and his trains of logic, but also, Chesterton directly in Orthodoxy rebukes the Stoics for a lot of the reasons that I think Christians might rightly, that they sort of believe in this inner light, is what he calls it in the book, that they believe so much in this inner light and this force in the universe, but they're not willing to tell you what you're supposed to do with that light or what you're supposed to do with this force or logic of the universe, that it might have rules, that it might have things that it wants you to do specifically, besides just live an orderly life. That Stoicism is incredibly limiting. I mean, Chesterton almost oozes contempt by name for Aurelius and the Stoics in a way that I don't think C.S. Lewis shared, because so much of Lewis's work, whether it be Till We Have Faces or the Screwtape Letters, seems to really admire and appreciate the works of Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca. It shows up in a lot of their work in a positive way. But at the end of the day, I think people like Chesterton were asking hard questions about the Stoics and whether or not the Logos, as a disembodied light of the universe, is going to do anything for you, because it doesn't ask anything of you. And you learned about Geeky Stoics through our video focused on Rainn Wilson and his book Soul Boom. There's so much curiosity right now in the world for religion and spirituality. But, we've kind of been here before. It's called the 1960s and 70s. There was a huge spiritual and soul boom during that time. It was not involved at all in an interest in Christianity. If you are only focused on an inner light, it doesn't require anything of you. And I think that that's the next step that we all have to take, is what does God want from us? He's chased us like a lion and hunted us down, but what is he asking of us? And it's not just good vibes.
And also, Chesterton's big thing was whimsy. And say what you will about the
Mm.
Stoics, whimsical is not a term that springs to mind. I mean, I've only read Marcus Aurelius, and I did that because the Art of Manliness podcast and website, I noticed Stoicism start picking up quite often, and I said I'd only really read them from the Church Fathers, so I decided to sample it. There's something that's wonderful and immediate about the Stoics, and some really good practical advice. But as you've indicated, there's always a but then what? Is there a telos? Is there anything greater than well ordered pencils laid out on your desk? Is there more to my life than simply order?
Yeah, I mean, there certainly has to be. It has to go in the direction of the numinous and of wonder. The right now I'm working on my second book. It is called Live Mythically, The Practical Wisdom of Great Stories, and it is very heavy on the Chronicles of Narnia, the Lord of the Rings, a lot of my love of Star Wars. And the basic idea is that when we start to get our life in order, when we start to restore focus, it's like we're living in a closed off room. And this is very much touched on by Alistair McGrath, who does C.S. Lewis's biography. The idea that we sort of live our lives in this big house, and we go into a house, and all these different rooms that are in the house are places where we can spend our time. And C.S. Lewis thought of the different rooms in the house as stories. One room in the house might be for him the wind and the willows, a place where he sort of feels like there's an underlying truth to the existence and life and moral universe of animals. And another room in the house might be, his friend's work writing The Hobbit. For me, there are different rooms in the house. There's Star Wars, there's Spider-Man, there's the Chronicles of Narnia, and some are more true than others. And what is the most true room? Well, Alistair McGrath would say that when you go into the room and spend time with a story, it might be very comfortable. In many ways, Game of Thrones is comfortable at times. I like certain elements of Game of Thrones, but it does not connect us to a deeper truth. It's a room without windows. And so my book is all about how the best stories are rooms that are not just orderly and clean, free of debris and rubble, but they've also got nice wallpaper. And by the way, they point you towards a deeper truth. They allow you to see that there's a world outside of the room that you're in, that there's a sun in the distance that lights everything that we're able to see. That's definitely like a C.S. Lewis way of thinking. And I believe, again, that appears in Chesterton. Seeing by sunlight or seeing by moonlight? Are you seeing the truest reflection of the world in front of you? And you can only do that with a room with windows. And so what I want people to understand when they get involved with Geeky Stoics is, what are the most true stories? And what are the stories that just feel good but are, in fact, not true at all?
Earlier, you mentioned Till We Have Faces, and the fox is somebody I've come back to quite a lot recently, particularly when he's overcome with emotion after Psyche, he believes, has died. And he says, "Oh no, child," when he's speaking to Orwell, it's like, you started philosophy earlier than I am. There's still a chance for you. With me, I started too late. He loved Psyche deeply, but he almost wants to cut the cord of those bonds of charity for upsetting his internal order. But the thing is, those are the most important things in life. So why on earth would you ever want to cut them? For me, one of my favorite Lewis quotations is in The Four Loves, where he talks about you can try and protect your heart, but it'll just die inside. If you're going to love anything, even just a pet, your heart is going to be broken. Yeah. And this seems to be a deal that Lewis understood, and he wasn't willing to forego all of the goods that come from love simply for Stoicism.
Yeah, well, I think it's a lifelong struggle for him. There's a huge amount of affection for the fox until we have faces. I just like one of the ones that I have right in front of me. It's always kind of coming back to, in accordance with nature, in accordance with nature. Everything is as bad or good as our opinion makes of it. I mean, that's just Epictetus, just recycled again and again. And again, the fox is a quite likable character. I think it comes back to C.S. Lewis's biography and some questions that we all have about the life that he lived. Not only that he admits to disliking children, and that, he kind of like tried to...
I'm a parent and I understand that.
Yeah, he disliked children, and he's been very clear about that. And he talks a little bit about...
He does do something very, very stoic there, in terms of he understands that there's a world out there and some things merit appropriate responses. And he says in The Abolition of Man, I don't really like children, but I know that's a defect in me. That's not me trying to reorder the universe. I know this is...
And
This is
And
my problem.
that actually speaks to the same section of the Abolition of Man, where he is saying that the best philosophies are the ones that make absolute truth claims. That particular section, that I was just thinking about that earlier, where he says that all Western and Eastern traditions value a doctrine of objective value.
Hmm.
The Stoics, the Buddhists, uh, and the Christians as well, the Platonists. And that's where he actually kind of mentions the thing about children. Like, children are great, and I actually don't like them, and that's a problem. Like, that's actually something in me that's broken. It's not, don't yuck some other people's yum.
Yum.
It's actually to say, no, children are great, and if you don't like them, that's a problem, and you need to fix that. But he did, and he let Lucy Barfield into his life and other kids during World War II that helped ignite and reinvigorate him sort of in a dark period of the early 40s, when he really needed a career pick-me-up and started doing Narnia. But I think just beyond that, we all have questions about his romantic life, not being married most of his life, and just like crossing that bridge in the end. I think he was a very guarded person. I think he really identified very much with the sort of emotional fear that is articulated by someone like the Fox, and that is pinned on the Stoics, sometimes unfairly. Like, it's not like they were actually emotionless shells, but that they were skeptical of what their emotions were trying to do in them. They viewed their emotions as potential opponents. And I think he did too. And I think that has a lot to do with his sort of wondrous and imaginative life as a loner. But then at the same time, his romantic life is strange, but he's also very giving with his friendships, almost too giving, to the frustration of Tolkien. He was almost like too willing to collect friends and not discriminate. He's just an endlessly interesting person, isn't he?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's good that we bring these two ideas together: the Stoicism, the philosophy, but then also the idea of storytelling. And because all of this sort of comes together in something that's going to happen at the end of this year, which is the new Narnia movie. I know you've done at least one post and one episode on this. How are you feeling about it at the moment? Because I think when you've done it, we didn't know too many details. Now we know something about the time that it's going to be set. We've seen some early pictures, some interesting comments by people involved. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So I try to keep my curmudgeonly instincts at bay as much as possible and start with something positive. I like Greta Gerwig. I think Greta Gerwig is a fantastic creative. Her track record is nothing but strong, really. I mean, almost every film that she has made for the past 10 years are exemplary films, beautiful movies, and they have deeper layers of meaning. And yes, I'm including the Barbie movie. I think, there was a worthwhile intellectual debate about the Barbie movie and whether or not it was good or bad, if it was like the worst of feminism or
What it
actually
was even saying.
yeah, it was, or if it was very realist about gender and the alienation between men and women. I found that movie to be profound, actually, and I trust her, but I just don't trust what other people around the project say about it. When actors and producers come out and start talking to the media asks them very dumb questions, and they usually then get dumb answers, and then we get bad news. So I am in a wait and see mode. I am not thinking too much about the Narnia reboot. I'm not allowing myself to think about it because I don't want to be hurt. But
We're back to Screw Tape Chapter 6 again.
yeah, I don't want to be hurt. So I'm just not thinking about it too much. I'm not going to form an impression about it. I think I'm just a little worried about what they've said about the time period shifting, that the time period of the magician's nephew is moving forward in the 20th century. And that raises a lot of questions about what the heck's going to be going on during The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe when we're escaping the London bombings of the Blitz. But I got to say, though, The Magician's Nephew, I'm so glad we're starting with that. I'm so excited. I'm so excited to meet Jadis and to see the world between worlds and the portals. That's going to be really cool. Talk about a connection between Narnia and Star Wars, by the way.
That's in one of the
Are you
books,
familiar with
isn't
this?
it?
Yeah.
The Wood Between the World. It's in one of the books. It's been a long time since I've read any of
Yeah.
those.
So George Lucas's closest understudy is Dave Filoni.
Mm-hmm.
He's most responsible for the Star Wars Rebels series, certain seasons of the Clone Wars animated series, and he also had a huge hand to play in the Avatar: The Last Airbender series over on Nickelodeon. Yeah, total art. Well, in Star Wars, he added an additional layer to the Force called the World Between Worlds, not to be mistaken with the Wood Between the Worlds, in which you travel through the Force into this black open space with a bunch of portals into different places and different time periods. And lo and behold, when he was asked about this, he cites C.S. Lewis and The Magician's Nephew as adding this very crucial piece of Star Wars canon into the new Star Wars universe. Very exciting. I just can't wait to see this, and I'm staying hopeful. But I just worry. I just worry about Hollywood. Everything they do creeps me out, and I don't think that they always come to it with the best of intentions. But I think Greta Gerwig is someone who has an appreciation for Lewis, and she has spoken beautifully about her Catholic upbringing. And though she is not a believer, she's could do amazing things. I mean, is Peter Jackson a Christian?
I couldn't
Yeah, I
even
don't.
tell you.
Yeah, I don't. I don't think so.
so.
I'm pretty sure. You know, he seems like the neckbeard type who would not be a Christian, but he's never said anything about faith. And yet, you can make a very beautifully done, reverent, and respectful movie. I think it just comes down to how much you trust certain filmmakers.
Mm. And whenever I sit just worrying about what's gonna happen, the thing I even come back to is even if there's a lot of stuff in there that I don't like, it will A, bring Lewis back into the conversation, and B, get lots of people reading him who haven't read him yet.
That's exactly right. I think it's, as fans of Lewis, I think we should all be wondering why he is not more relevant in the way that Tolkien became relevant in the early 2000s. I mean, obviously, a great series of movies changes everything for your name and recognition long after you're dead. And Narnia was out at the same time, but those second two movies kind of tanked everything for the Narnia trilogy. And Tolkien still is riding strong 25 years later after those movies really changed the game in Hollywood. This is a huge moment for Lewis to come back on the map and for us to possibly, I don't know, I guess ignite excitement around a lot of his stories that would still make wonderful films. I am out here every day advocating, I mean, of course, for a space trilogy series of movies, but not just a trilogy of movies. I want them to be anime, David. I think the best way to do the space trilogy is like a Studio Ghibli style anime. Because those books are like just like cups of tea. They're not high octane. They're very slow and weird and brooding, and the visuals of the space trilogy are not going to make sense unless you allow them to be animated.
Yeah.
By hand and by pencil. So I'm just really out here rooting for a renaissance around C.S. Lewis's work. It's time.
We are completely in agreement with regards to the space trilogy. And I when they actually first announced the Narnia Netflix thing, my pitch was for The Horse and His Boy to be a cartoon. I actually think that medium would work really well for that book. And you also then get out of the problem of, do the horse's lips move when they're talking? If you abstract it a little bit into an animation, it's much easier for your brain to be able to deal with that.
Talking rabbits are cute. Talking horses are not cute.
Yeah, maybe perhaps a little creepy, but yeah, I would love to see somebody try and do the space trilogy. I think you could do a live action version of the first one. The second one, it starts getting harder. You got to come up with some creative ways of getting around an awful lot of nudity. But I really just also want to see somebody just try and do that hideous strength some kind of justice. The BBC brought out a radio play. It was only a few hours. But it started well, but that's a lot of book, and they cut so much stuff out of it. It lost its fun.
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. No, I think we could be at a turning point for C.S. Lewis's cultural legacy. So I remain excited, nevertheless, and I am just tuning out the entertainment news as much as I can.
I think that's a very stoic response. And with that, our time is already up. We will have to do this again, but where can people find you in the meantime?
Yeah, best place to get in touch with me is over at geekystoics.com. And that will connect you over to our YouTube channel. And we've got a Discord where people are always talking about Marcus Aurelius and C.S. Lewis. So always worth it.
Wonderful. Stephen, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, David.
And viewers, please join us again next time when we'll continue going further up and further in. Cheers.